Everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia Missing, available on Amazon and coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson-Zia. Double suspense, double the fun. Check it out coming soon on Amazon. Also brought to you by Illuminatically, Think Tank of the Future. The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on life of King David, available on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner and High 10 Music. Check out the latest at high10music.com. We're here with a terrific gentleman who's a longtime PBS reporter, journalist, mainly in broadcasting, originally from Britain and now in New York City. Grew up in the Scottish borderlands. We'll talk more about that. Also, he's done magazines, newspapers like the New York Times, British Guardian, and more as well. Spent 2 decades with British commercial TV. He did some reporting, producing, making documentaries before moving to the U.S. And he worked with ABC, CBS, CNN, Discovery, A&E, History Channel, and ITV. Graduated Oxford University, U.S. citizen since 2002. And also he taught broadcast news at Columbia University Grad School of Journalism. And he's got a new book about decades-long search to determine the identity of his father. Live, ladies and gentlemen, Plus Studios in beautiful downtown New York City, the longtime PBS reporter, journalist, and also spent 2 decades in British commercial TV. Now in New York with a new book called A Question of Paternity, My Life as an Unaffiliated Reporter. Ladies and gentlemen, the multi-talented David Tereschuk. David, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, good day to you, whatever part of the day it might be with you. Yes, glad to be on your show, Mike.
Well, it's great to have you on board, David. So you're a longtime PBS reporter, journalist, mainly in broadcasting. You grew up in the Scottish borderlands. You're originally from Britain. Now you're in New York City. You also worked with magazines, newspapers like New York Times, British Guardian, and also spent 2 decades with British commercial TV. You did some reporting, producing, making documentaries for moving to the U.S. You also worked with ABC, CBS, CNN, Discover, A&E, History Channel, as well as ITV. You graduated from Oxford University and later taught broadcast news at Columbia Grad School of Journalism. And you have a new book, which is a decades-long search to determine the identity of your father, thought to be a priest, a German POW, and use the skills to investigate. It's called A Question of Paternity, My Life as an Unaffiliated Reporter. And before getting all that, David, tell us how I first got started.
Well, I've always been puzzled about my beginnings because I grew up in a household where we didn't talk about such things. It was a big secret. I didn't know who my father was. Nobody was going to tell me. And I think I was warned off the topic. I was warned away from the whole subject. I don't remember ever being told out loud that I shouldn't be talking about this or asking about it. But I think I just picked up the message, as kids often can, that this was a topic we do not visit. It's a topic we do not talk about. And so I guess I just internalized it, and I bought into the cover story that was invented for me and my arrival in the household. We were a poor family in public housing on the Scottish borderland, as you say. And my mother, when she conceived me, was 15 years old, 16 when I was born. And this was a matter of great scandal for our family. And a fiction was invented to cover up this scandal, I think. That was the purpose. I don't know how they thought they would get away with this, but the idea was that I should be passed off as my grandmother's last child, latest child, last
Grandmother's
child.
last child. Oh my goodness! Wow.
She'd already had 10 children, 9 of whom survived, and she was well past childbearing age, I have to say. So, as I say, I'm not at all sure how they thought they'd get away with this. But the sort of corollary of that, of course, was that my real mother was in fact my sister. I'm sorry. You see, the confusion was instilled in me. My mother appeared to be my sister, and I called my grandmother "ma'am," the Scottish way of saying "mom," and I called my sister, mother, Hilda, her first name, as if she were my sister. And there were 2 other little fellows in our household too. My real mother's younger brothers, and they were really, I mean, in real life, they were decidedly playmates for me, and they seemed like siblings. But in fact, of course, they were technically speaking my uncles. And this uncertainty, this strange thing, which I guess I understood in some way, wasn't the real truth, but I lived with it. And at some point, I'm not sure when this would have happened. Maybe when I was about 7 or 8, I think I realized that my mother really was my mother. But I still called her Hilda, and I did right up until her death a few years ago. And that was the sort of strange, uncertain surroundings in which I grew up. So I suppose, because I wasn't quite sure whose I was, I was unsure about who I was.
Mm.
And that sort of lack of self-knowledge, lack of self-confidence, for sure. I was a desperately shy and withdrawn kid. That condition was to stick with me for a long time, and sort of rather hobbled me as a kid. I had a pretty tough time adjusting to the world at large. Things changed. My mother married eventually when I was about 8 or 9. She married a much-traveled man, a refugee, a displaced person from Eastern Europe, which is why I have a Ukrainian name.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
He didn't actually adopt me, although I thought he had. It turned out later that he hadn't. He made some attempt to befriend me when he was wooing my mother, but once they were married, and they had another child of their own, just the two of them, my half sister, I suppose, but in every way a real full sister to me. And certainly as we grew up eventually and became really strong friends in adulthood. But at that time, we formed this new unit of a nuclear unit, you would call it, I suppose, 2 adults, 2 children. We moved away from this countryside area where we'd grown up in public housing, and where I was growing up in public housing. And we moved to the industrial belt of northern England, like a lot of poor Scots do.
Mm.
They travel south in search of work. And then I was in a new environment, and guess what? I had that same sense of not knowing how I fitted in. Um, I I had this strange, or to the Manchester people I was surrounded by, it was a strange accent from Scotland, and I had this strange, weird, the other school kids call it, this weird name, Tereschuk. And I was also bumped up a grade. I think it's testimony to superior education
Oh,
where I'd come from.
wow. Okay. Amazing.
The cost for me, though, was that I was always the smallest kid in the class. And so another reason for me to be picked on and bullied. And that was the case for quite a while, until I guess I learned to fight back physically. But this sense of just not fitting in, and being odd and out of the ordinary in some way was I thought, to me, a terrible heavy burden. But then again, I I got to deal with it. I got to learn in my early teens, when I was in a big high school surrounded by uh, pretty violent people.
Mm.
Young people, but but violent. And uh, and I also got into the music scene, which,
Oh,
as a
nice.
matter of history, is interesting, because this was Northwest England. Manchester is only 40 miles from Liverpool, and there was this enormous upsurge in homegrown rock and roll. Heavily influenced by rhythm and blues from America, Chicago's Maxwell Street Blues in particular. I'm not quite
Yes,
sure how
that's
that
right. Yeah, I
connection
was
was
on
made.
that. I grew up in that
Yeah.
area, and especially Maxwell Street Blues. I mean, that's where it's known. It's like, yeah, Buddy Guy and Muddy Waters and everything like that. Chess Records. That was a really
Absolutely,
hotbed
yeah.
area. Yes, that was a
We were trading vinyl records of those guys' work, and you know, God help you if you scratched another person's record that had been imported from America. It was like gold, you know. So I joined bands. I was a pretty indifferent musician, to be honest, but you know, everybody. There were everybody in that age, boys certainly for sure, were swept up in this musical scene, and there was a great rivalry between Manchester and Liverpool. The Liverpool, as we called it, Liverpool had the Beatles. We in Manchester had the Hollies. I don't know if anyone remembers the Hollies,
I
but
remember the Hollies very well. One of my favorites,
oh,
yes,
good for
and the
you.
Fab Four, one of my big influences. Over the Stones, they asked me, "You like the Beatles or Stones?" I says the Beatles by far because they made the Hall of Fame as a group and they made the Hall of Fame as individuals. Ringo Starr barely got in, but you know, he did really well.
Yeah, and the Beatles beat the Hollies, I'm afraid. I'm sad to say, because you know we were very loyal in Manchester to our homegrown group. But the thing about that music scene was that it introduced me to the smoky uh, basement nightclubs that we would play our gigs in, and there I met English beer and marijuana too. The air was thick with the stuff, and I tell you, at 3 o'clock in the morning, with that warm English beer and the marijuana smoke, I was suddenly at one with everyone. That sense of not fitting in gone completely. I was perfectly happy, and you know I went on. There was a saying in Manchester taken from a writer called Belito. I'm blanking on his first name, but he was a wit of some kind, and he was a friend of Noel Coward and of Cole Porter. And he said, rather famously, or famously in Manchester anyway, he said, the quickest way out of Manchester is a bottle of Gordon's gin.
How do you
And
like that? I should take that advice a long time ago as a kid. Get some Gordon's gin, get out of there. I should have took that advice years
well,
ago.
you know, that could have been me because I was heavily into booze and other mind-altering drugs too at that point. But in fact, the real passport out of Manchester for me was to get a scholarship to Oxford, and that
Oh,
and that changed my life completely. And I owe Oxford an awful lot. I had 3 years of incredibly good education and an awakening about beautiful things, about fine literature and fine wines too, I have to say. And
oh, one of
the
my
alcohol
favorites.
was a big part of it. And I went into a profession, journalism, which was quite a lot of good cover for me as a heavy drinker. There were lots of heavy drinkers around me.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, of course, is that I when I got to Oxford, I felt like, guess what? I didn't fit in. And
Nowadays, who needs a fit and we
alcohol
can
came to my
stand out?
yeah, alcohol
Who
came to
needs
my
to?
rescue again, but it was a very different kind. It was sort of socially accepted and very sophisticated, and you know, had this adult sheen about it. And as I say, I had cover for my drinking when I went into journalism too. But the sort of niggling thing underneath all the time was that I didn't know the truth about my own origins, and I was able to push it to the back of my mind with all this alcohol and drugs and success. I was actually having professionally a very successful life. And I could push it all to the back of my mind until it got to the point where I couldn't anymore, and I
Right.
had to get honest about what was really true, which is that I was concerned. I wanted to know where I came from and who's you know who I was fathered by in at least one sense.
Mm-hmm.
And the search eventually started when I was quite well into my adulthood. In fact, I was 40. 42 years old when I started getting serious about doing the search, which
Oh,
I
really?
embarked on and
Okay.
ended up as the book, A Question of Paternity.
Hmm. And what was that point at when you're 42 that simply said, what was that precise moment, the event and everything that says, I really got to find out who my dad is? I mean, what were we doing that event when you're 42?
Well, it was more than one event. It was a concatenation, as they say, of a bunch of things. I got sober. I stopped drinking and using other drugs. I changed countries. I came to the United States. One of the best decisions I ever made. And the other really important decision I made is I got married. I got married to a wonderful woman who was from California originally, but lived in New York, and we settled in New York. And life got very much better. But there was this. Actually, it's not so much a but as in a contradiction. It was all part and parcel of the same thing. I wanted to live a life that was honest and straightforward. And I wasn't avoiding things in my life like I did with the question of my paternity, which I managed to avoid for so long. And I
Hmm.
wanted to, I wanted to look at life straight on. And that is very closely connected with. In fact, it's a key, I think, element of getting sober. You start to look at life as it really is, rather than skewed and filtered by booze. And I wanted to get at the truth. And
Hmm.
I was a journalist. I was well equipped with all the investigative tools to get at the truth. So I started the search then.
And certainly did as well too, to look at either half full, half empty, and everything like that. And we'll talk more about the book, Question of Paternity, My Life as an Unaffiliated Reporter with David Tereschuk. But first, you listen to The Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love you first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has got great reviews. And Evil Evidence Stories by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for It Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson-Zia. Double the suspense, double the fun. Check it out soon on Amazon. Also brought to you by Illuminati, think tank of the future, bring scientists and engineers together from all over the world, creating a method to construct a renewable generator. This unique product operates on a closed loop system that generates more energy internally than it needs to function. The extra electricity can be used to run everything: homes, power grids, phones, laptops. The power source is renewable, highly scalable, most importantly, self-regenerating. Visit facebook.com/Illumitical. That's ELLUMENIPTICAL today. Also, the Mike Wagner Show is brought to you by Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, including 30 of his paintings and King David Psalms. The Sweet Psalmist gives a new perspective of David through the Psalms he wrote and his time as a shepherd where it started and complicated yet turbulent relationship with King Saul. The story of love, betrayal, repentance, hope, and more. Check it out. Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Make sure you check it out today. Also brought to you by High 10 Music, featuring the smash hit Baby Come Back. New music coming soon. Check it out. high10music.com. I'll support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. The MikeWagnerShow.com, heard in over 4 countries and 40 podcast platforms, 100 countries. Take us with you on any mobile device. Follow us on Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and more. For great gift ideas, Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast, t-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies, makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com, check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Great books, merchandise, and more. Check it out today. We're here with longtime PBS reporter, journalist, mainly in broadcasting, spent 2 decades in the profession before moving to U.S. David Tereschuk with the book A Question of Paternity, My Life as an Unaffiliated Reporter here on the Mike Wagner Show. Spending 2 decades in British TV, that's got to be a success. Worked ABC, CBS, CNN, Discovery, A&E, and the History Channel. And, you also sat down with some great guests as well, too. And maybe an example of some of the great guests you've had.
Oh, well, a journalist reporting on international affairs gets to meet, at least, perhaps not mingle, maybe that's not the right word, but meet with some impressive individuals, leaders of their countries. Oh boy. If I was to single out one, it would be Nelson Mandela, who's head and shoulders, in my mind, above every other leader that I met. And amongst a lot of African leaders, I got to know quite a few, but Nelson Mandela was the most towering of all, certainly in my mind. I didn't have very long an interview with him, and it was only one interview. And it was a case of a journalist's ambush, I have to say. There was one of those situations. It was the evening before the elections that were to transform South Africa, Nelson Mandela's country, which had been under the oppression of white supremacy for 300 years at that point. And these elections are going to be the first time ever that the majority black population of South Africa could vote. And of course, Nelson Mandela would be the man that they voted in. It's a matter of historical record, and we could all see it. But the transition was a tense one. Things had gotten very tense during the negotiations towards these elections, and political murders, many of them committed by the white supremacist right wing, were going on at an extraordinary rate, something like 20 a day at the time. And the period is remembered for this peaceful transition that was achieved, but in fact, on the facts on the ground were very concerning. The tension in the air was palpable, and as I say, these killings were going on day by day. But Nelson Mandela himself, I think, largely by the imposition and the spreading of his own charisma, his own personal magnetism, he managed to present an example of peaceful transition, of a refusal to act in a spirit of vengeance, despite all the good reasons people had for feeling hard done by. I mean, horribly oppressed for, as I say, 300 years. And there was a certain nervousness about how things might go, and one of the sort of barometers for that was a state of South Africa's position in the international money markets. And one of the important things that you have to recognize when you're a journalist trying to get hold of important people to interview is that such considerations, such financial considerations, often count for more than anything else. And to pacify, really, to reassure the financial markets, Nelson Mandela's party, the African National Congress, the oldest liberation movement in the entire continent of Africa, had decided that where Mandela's voice had to be heard on the eve of this extraordinary transformation was to be in New York. Wall Street had to be kept assured that everything was going to be fine. So the three big American networks were the ones who are going to get to interview Mandela, not me.
Darn, I wish I was there to check.
So I had to face this uncomfortable fact. But on the other hand, the headquarters of ANC for the election campaign was a hotel that I always stayed in when I went to South Africa, the Carlton Hotel in Johannesburg. And I knew the staff very well. And the kitchen staff especially gave me a little tour of the back corridors, along with the big public rooms in which the press conference, for instance, was held with Mandela, the last press conference on the very eve of this extraordinary change that was about to happen. And it was perfectly obvious the route that Mandela would have to take with his security retinue to the quiet room where, in those days, the network news hosts were Dan Rather for CBS. Oh gosh, I'm blanking now.
Walter
Tom Brokaw
Cronkite?
for BBC, and Peter Jennings for ABC. They were the three who were going to take turns to interview Mandela, sit down, proper cultivated sort of conversation. But I stopped them in the corridor outside the kitchen, and the security men wanted to stop me getting to him, but he, in a kind of almost magisterial way, just waved them away. And my assignment was actually for the United Nations at the time, and that was the first thing I said, of course. I'm here for the United Nations, Mr. Mandela, and I launched. I don't even remember the precise question I started with. I think it was about what he expected the turnout to be. I think, but he latched on to United Nations, and he wanted to make sure that the world knew that he was personally greatly in debt to the United Nations for their help in defeating apartheid, the white supremacist rule in South Africa, and the UN's dedication to eventually having a democratic country. And we talked along those lines for, as I say, about 5 or 6 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And to be honest with you, Mike, I rather lost the plot. It wasn't one of the greater interviews that I've ever done. I went through the motions of doing the interview, but my mind was somewhere else. I was so obsessed with the thought, oh my God, I'm interviewing Mandela here in the kitchen. And all these vast,
He thought it was a conversation, right?
That's right. And, we were surrounded by huge industrial-sized cans of tomatoes and sacks of flour. And there I was with Nelson Mandela. And, he brought the thing to a close. It might have gotten embarrassing otherwise. And I said possibly one of the most superfluous, for sure, and banal things I could possibly have said. I said, good luck for tomorrow, sir.
I
And he
like
won, of course, in a landslide.
Oh,
My best
yes.
wishes were of no use to him particularly.
That was a really good story. Talking to him, surrounded by a sack of potatoes, tomato cans. I mean, I wish I was in places like that. But you've been in other places as well, too. And of course, you taught broadcast at Columbia University, and you also honed your skills, investigative journalist, and of course, especially in the book, A Question of Paternity, My Life as an Unaffiliated Reporter. And basically, it's just your father was many things. You thought he was a priest, a German
Yeah,
POW.
my mother told me she'd been raped by a priest when she was 15.
Uh-huh.
And it was a shocking story, and I was stunned by it. And that was the evidence I had to go on as I embarked upon my search. I wanted to find this alleged rapist priest. And it was 40 plus years after the event. And as we know, the Catholic Church had lots of problems. And this was in the 1990s and early 2000s. And many exposés were being written and broadcast about sexual abuse by priests on young people, mostly boys, but quite a lot of girls too. And this was one individual story that I really felt I had to expose, not just for the personal reason that I wanted to find the man responsible, but I felt that here was yet another case of the kind of abuse of authority that priests have been allowed for far too long to get away with.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that was what was it, 1990? I'm trying to think who the Pope was at the time. I'm drawing blanks here. Let's see. Wasn't John Paul? Was it
It
Pope
had
Paul? It's
been
like,
John Paul right up until that time, close on to that. Then it became Benedict. But the current pope has changed the rules, and as a result of that, there's a lot more emphasis now on priests who happen to come into, uh, uh, well, who break their vows, basically, particularly the vow of celibacy. But abuse of authority too is involved here. Uh, Priests who find themselves in that situation are looked at now by the church as having a responsibility to the children who might result from such behavior, and also that the person with whom the relationship had developed needs to be taken care of too by the church. So I found the diocese, the Catholic diocese in the area where I was brought up, at first not very willing to collaborate, but then in a new atmosphere that Pope Francis had established, I started to get more collaboration, and indeed the local police force, plus I mean that was a bit of pressure I could apply to the diocese. There was a new policy in Britain as a whole to take sexual abuse a lot more seriously, and the idea of safeguarding minors came to the fore, and a police investigation was opened into the rape of my mother. And I had a lot of cooperation from that local police force. But I have to say that it was one of those uh, cases of chasing facts that was not easy to engage in for a start, but more importantly, simply led to inconclusive ends. We were not able to prove with any certainty, although some suspects looked very promising, if you like, in investigators' terms, and we were narrowing in on one individual who might well have been my father. The evidence was suggesting he even disappeared, conveniently enough, just at the point when I was born, and then reappeared in the church records a couple of years later with a somewhat changed name in a part of the diocese far distant from us, but still acting as a priest. Um, and and then we know where he died and when, and we knew who his relatives were. And because of knowing who his relatives were, it was possible to do a DNA check. And
I was just gonna ask that. Yes. Hmm.
the DNA check showed incontrovertibly that he could not possibly have been my father. So that was the end of that line of investigation.
Okay. He also had the British military and the Red Cross involved as well too. So you had a lot of people you're using.
Well, journalists do get a lot of help from people when they're looking for things. So we're not experts in all the fields that we investigate, but we get a lot of help from people who are experts in those fields to help us. And sure enough, I got a lot of help from the Red Cross because it became another line of investigation opened up. It became possible. It became really quite likely that my father was somebody else at all, entirely, not a priest, despite what my mother had told me. And it was, I think, on balance. I don't want to give away the whole plot of the book, but it
You
was
don't need
starting to
to.
look.
That's what we're here for.
um, it became more and more likely that the culprit, the person who fathered me in one sense only, could have been one of the prisoners of war, German prisoners of war, who were kept
Oh,
in a prisoner
yes.
of war camp on the outskirts of our village. It was still there in 1948, 3 years after the end of World War II. German prisoners of war. There were 1,100 of these prisoner of war camps dotted around the United Kingdom. And the prisoners themselves were not repatriated until the year of my birth. And more than one source suggested that my mother was having a relationship with one of those prisoners of war. Young though she was, and a crime was being committed, of course. It was statutory rape by almost every Western country's standards. And that became the new possibility. And genetics, DNA in particular, and those genealogical websites that rely upon DNA samples for them to work have had me comparing my DNA with something like 11 million other people's samples.
Oh my gosh.
And increasingly, it seems that I have relatives in Germany.
That is interesting.
None of them who have appeared yet who are close enough for us to be able to establish a direct link. But somewhere in those people's family trees, there is possibly a man who was in the United Kingdom in the northern part of England where it joins with Scotland, who might possibly be the person who fathered me.
This made me think of this question too, and this made me think of it. Was your supposed mom living in Germany back then, or did she run off to Germany? And the question I was going to get is, what was she doing in Germany at that time?
She was 15 years old. She wasn't running anywhere. She was a high school girl attending high school in the local city about 10 miles from our village. And she had no wherewithal to travel beyond that. And then, the time frame is very clear. I was conceived in January of 1948 and born in October of 1948. And no, she was not. She never went any distance at all from our village.
Okay, and what was your mom's upbringing like? Back then in Germany.
In Britain, you mean?
Yes, that's right. Around 15, 16, and she was born there and everything like that. So what was it like for her at the time growing up before
Well,
16?
I learned a lot about my mother that I hadn't really known. I mean, I'd gotten some ideas from the conversations I would hear as a child, but she never talked about her own background very much, and she would minimize one particular episode of her life, which I think was very important. It's probably an understatement to say important because she she had a tough childhood herself. She was fostered away from the home for 5 years
Oh
of that
wow.
young life. She was sent to live with three very, very religious spinsters, they were called at the time, three sisters who never married, lived together, and had a kind of a reputation as good-hearted, well-meaning people and very devout. Uh, so she had this somewhat strict religious upbringing for a while. And then, just as she was passing into puberty, she came back to my grandmother's home. Uh, and I don't think it's an accident that it was at that point that she became pregnant with me.
Okay. All right. And I think we're getting to a point as well too. And how long did it take for you to forgive your mother, like with the things you went through and everything like that? How long did it take?
Well, as soon as I heard the story from her that she'd been raped, I happened to find myself in the company of a man who became a great and close friend. He was a Catholic priest. He was in New Jersey, and he had an interesting job for his diocese. He was in charge of his term for them was airing priests who get into trouble.
Huh.
So he knew about this field. And and I told him my story, what I just heard just a couple of weeks before, um, from my mother, that she'd been raped by a British priest. And one of his first questions was just that: have you forgiven your mother? And, I found myself saying immediately, yes, I have, almost without thinking. It was, but it, but at the same time, forgiving her doesn't mean that I understand her. I'm still not sure why she sent me, why she told me this story, which later investigation seems to suggest was not true. Um, or perhaps it was true, and yet another event was happening that actually explains my conception. Um, I'm baffled by it. But and I also realized, almost as I was saying that affirmative yes that I had forgiven her, that forgiveness is not an event; it's a process. And I have come absolutely to knowing that I have forgiven my mother. And as I consider her life, and though I'm baffled by some of the decisions she took, especially the one about telling me the story of the rape, I've come to see that the only possible response I can have to her and her life with me and her life after I left her family, but she maintained this strange uh, lack of uh, of transparency, at the very least, let's call it. Um, and though I don't understand why it happened, I think the only response I can possibly have is compassion for her.
I think that's something very important as well, too. And lastly, what can we learn from all this?
Well, I hope readers might take from it what I certainly found for myself is that, if you're living in a family, if you're living in a family where there are secrets and you're baffled by them and you feel burdened by them, the thing to do, I would suggest, I try to follow this course myself, is to ask the questions. Questions are very important to me. I'm a journalist. They're an essential tool of my trade. But in this personal realm, even more important, I'd say. Keep asking the questions. And I wouldn't do it aggressively or insistently, but I would certainly do it and do it again and again and again until I found something like a truth that I was able to say was as complete as I can get it to be.
I think that's very important. Maybe think of a Columbo. Oh, and one more thing. It makes you think of it. So, oh, that's an amazing
And there
story.
may be one more thing. You never know. They may suddenly pop up and all of these databases that have my DNA. Something might pop up that suggests who the individual actually was, and I will know. I will have a name, maybe an address, maybe a bit of history. You never know. I'm open to knowing the truth, but for the moment, I have to be content with the progress that I have made towards knowing the answer to the question of my paternity.
And certainly indeed as well too. And we're with author David Tereschuk, and a bit more about the book, A Question of Paternity: My Life as an Unaffiliated Reporter. We'll get that in just 1 minute. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundCloud Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's Missing. Also brought to you by Illuminatical Think Tank of the Future. The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on life of King David, available on Amazon and High Time Music. Check out the list at high10music.com. We'll be back with the author, David Tereschuk, of A Question of Paternity after this time out. We're back with author David Tereschuk of A Question of Paternity: My Life as an Unfair Reporter, here on the Mike Wagner Show. And just one more thing, David, where can we find your book and all your works at?
Well, it's available on Amazon, of course, and you also find it at my own website, which is The Media Beat. That's all one word, themediabeat.com. That's where my column appears. It's where my weekly podcast is posted, and it's where you can get the book as well.
We'll certainly check that out. We're off the David Tereschuk of A Question of Paternity, and just a couple of more things. Who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Oh gosh, biggest influence in my career. An individual, a person? That's
Anybody,
a hard one
in
to
general.
say. Well, I have to say, if I wanted to pick one person out of the 70 plus years of history that I've been associated with, that I would think had the most effect on me, would be Nelson Mandela.
And certainly indeed as well, too. Just a great man. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Ask questions.
Yes, indeed. And you'll get the answers. We're with author David Tereschuk of A Question of Paternity, My Life as an Unfiltered Reporter here on the Mike Wagner Show. David, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We'll laugh to have you back. Once again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your books?
www.themediabeat.com. That's the place to find all my output.
And we'll certainly check that out. Once again, David, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We'll laugh at you back. We wish our best. And David, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thanks very much, Mike.